As I read more about history, and I'm really fascinated with the World War II period, pre and post World War II, because it kind of set the stage for the world in the last 70, 80 years. Since then, it's been kind of the framework of the global architecture of political power was set in that time with Bretton Woods, the Marshall Plan, and different military agreements. And so I've collected some of the books. These are books I've read. These are books I'm reading, and these are to read for research purposes. And some of these are just amazing. Like you've got Ben Rich, for example, not admits, but he explained classified things that he couldn't talk about in the 70s when they were building the stealth program. And this is amazing. It's kind of it's a number of things. William Cooper is a military secret space program insider, and that's a very broad book. The Day After Roswell is about how the military used the crash at Roswell to develop things like computers, lasers, fiber optics, night vision, fly-by consciousness technology, and it was all managed by Philip Corso. And he wrote this book through William Burns when he was alive. And this is just amazing because if you think about AI and Silicon Valley and computers, it all came from the Roswell crash through the military, who gave it to Sun Microsystems, in that time IBM, Apple later, and other companies. This I have really not dug into too deeply, but this is basically a very detailed account of Operation Paperclip. And I know about Paperclip, and I know about NASA and the whole story, but this is a very detailed account that basically Wernher von Braun, who was created NASA, not only he was Hitler's scientist, he had slaves, and he ran slave factories, and he knew about what was going on underground, the experiments and the bad things they did to those guys. And 2 weeks later, he was in the United States working with the U.S. military on top secret projects, and basically created the whole rocket program, which later folded into SpaceX. And there's a good and bad side to the Germans, right? And a lot of them were being funded by the United States, which leads to Anthony Sutton, who's one of my favorite authors. And I never read this work because I don't know why. It was a blind spot. It's so interesting how Wall Street and U.S. corporations funded Hitler, basically, before, during, and after the war. When the war started, they started doing it secretly. And I don't have in this list IBM and the Holocaust, because I don't think I ever bought that book, or maybe I gave it to someone. But IBM and the Holocaust is so well referenced. I mean, Edwin Black had hundreds of researchers pouring through German translated documents to find out the facts, and then wrote this book. And this is kind of similar, but in a more academic way. Then we've got the Bilderberg Group, which was created in 1954, just after World War II. And World War II is when the deep state was created in its modern form. There was always a type of deep state behind the scenes, even if you go back to medieval history. But the Bilderberg Group was a specific group that managed this shadow government, is maybe a different word. Deep state has a lot of connotations, and it's kind of been bastardized because of the situation with Trump. But this is also a critical piece, and all these things are happening together at the same time, and that's what's interesting. And then I've got this from my friend Brad Olson, who really did a great job of honing down on a specific thing, which is Antarctica, and that the Germans did go to Antarctica after the war. and remain there to this day, or at least they were there until a few years ago. Some people say they left in the 2021 period, but anyway, and this is all based on facts. If you go through this book, it's like pictures of documents, references. It's very well cited. I've got to get Salah's Antarctica book. I lost it, but I have I gave it to someone. This is, but this also references this kind of exopolitical history. So these are books I've read. Exopolitics, this is a must-read for anyone. The financial system is important here because that's how these guys control everyone. And here is an interesting book I stumbled upon about the National Security Council. And most people don't know the president himself doesn't make independent decisions when it comes to going to war in Iran. I mean, he takes all the blame, but it's actually the National Security Council that decides these things. And the president meets with the National Security Council, but in many cases, like in the case of George Bush Jr., H.W. Bush, he basically, the council ran everything. And probably the same is true under Obama and many presidents. Now, Trump may be running a different administration, but the point about this book is historically it's this shadow system. And this is a mainstream book. This is not a conspiracy book. This is David Rothkopf is I think he's part of the Council on Foreign Relations. This is not a conspiracy type of book. This is just facts. Facts are president does not make the decisions. He's informed of the decisions, but the NSC is really what's running the show, and they meet with the president regularly and provide him updates, but they're really the ones pulling the strings. And then I read these two books that really are just deep and amazing about the non-human influence on human Earth. And then I'll go to these ones that I have not read yet. Bible Code, Spy Masters. I found this in Barnes & Noble. Just about how the CIA influences society. There's hundreds of books on this topic. I just picked up this one. Sometimes it's not so obvious which books are really good or not, but you can read the first few pages or the foreword or introduction and get an idea if this is really meaningful, and this looks pretty interesting. This is a book I have read lots of articles and listened to this guy being interviewed, but never read this actual book. This guy worked for the Navy, and he worked on what you could say is early stages of Solar Warden and the Secret Space Program. And this is a real story about MK Ultra. But what's scary about this, the one witness referenced about this book said that Mengele, like the real Mengele, came to the United States and started this program. And then this one, last but certainly not least, from one of my favorite authors, Anthony Sutton, The Best Enemy Money Can Buy. And this is about how the United States was feeding Russia technology and weapons technology during the Cold War because we needed an enemy. We needed to basically play a game to justify the insane spending, which was financing the black budget, which is a whole other story. But the point is the whole Cold War was basically fake. Fake in the sense that, I mean, the threat was real, but the same group of people was funding both sides. They were just playing like spy versus spy, basically, with billions of dollars and nuclear tipped missiles. So it's not to say that like they weren't real. It wasn't like a war exercise. It was a real war, but it was crafted artificially by some brilliant evil geniuses. So these are some of the books, and I'm thinking of just like buying lots of books and videos and collecting online documents and references and everything. Just to basically have a reference, because a lot of this is not very mainstream, like the truth about what happened after World War II, about the Germans and just the corporations. I mean, if you skip all the extreme stuff, if you look at IBM, was never held accountable for providing basically all of the computers used for the Holocaust were created by IBM. and they were maintained. The Nazis were a client of IBM in the 1930s and 40s during the war. This is all well-documented fact. This is not a conspiracy. And yet, that's not part of the mainstream narrative. And like when I was going to collect all this information on Amazon you can buy IBM and the Holocaust on Amazon, but they will not pay affiliate commissions on it. But they'll pay affiliate commissions on all these other books about aliens and everything. So why? It's because they're afraid of lawsuits. But anyway, I'm compelled to write this book because it seems like there's not a lot of work out there which collects all this and kind of presents it as one story. And I think that's an important piece of history, because here's where we pivoted from sort of like an agrarian civilization to a really high tech. It was really after World War II. We had microwaves. Within 20 years we had computers. We had computers almost immediately, but they weren't. They were in the military. They weren't. They were vacuum giant computers. But that's what happened with New York. Is it shifted during that time from factories to computers? I mean, our whole world changed, and I think there's a lot of truth here and a lot of value in this information, because it's really about who we are. It's not only about history and facts. It's really all of this is our culture. If you add this all up, that's who we are, and we can. It's very therapeutic for all of us to have a solid foundation in who we are, and especially if we want to know where we're going, and so that's all. So this is just a little project I'm working on. Super interesting stuff, and I definitely recommend to get any of these books. They're all just mind-blowing.